We think of US presidents as these monumental figures carved into mountainsides and printed on money. But behind the stoic portraits and grand speeches were just weird dudes. Today, we're not looking at their policies. We're looking at their bizarre habits, their secret obsessions, and the utterly unhinged things they did when they thought no one was watching. Get ready for 33 of the weirdest presidential quirks in history that your history teacher definitely left out of the textbook. 1. Lyndon B. Johnson operated on a level of no privacy that would make a reality TV star blush. His office wasn't just the Oval, it was any room he happened to be in, especially the bathroom. And I mean especially the bathroom. LBJ famously held official meetings while seated on the toilet, door wide open, summoning his top aides to stand there and discuss national security while he took care of international affairs. Can you imagine? You're a nervous intern, you've practiced your presentation all week, and you're finally called in, only to find the President of the United States multitasking in a way that is both impressive and deeply, deeply traumatizing. It was the ultimate power move. How can you argue about budget appropriations with a man who is making that much eye contact from a porcelain throne? You just can't. 2. Andrew Jackson, a man who could probably cuss the paint off a barn, had a pet parrot named Pole. And like any good pet, Pole learned everything from his owner, especially the spicy vocabulary. When Jackson finally passed away, his funeral was meant to be a solemn affair. That is, until Pole the parrot decided it was his time to shine. In front of a crowd of grieving politicians and dignitaries, the bird unleashed a torrent of profanity so creative and relentless, it reportedly shocked the entire congregation into silence. The parrot wasn't just swearing, it was delivering a masterclass. It was like a drunk uncle giving a wedding toast, but with more feathers. Priests were aghast, ladies fainted, and eventually the bird had to be physically ejected from the funeral for heckling the mourners. 3. In the 1830s, the Sultan of Oman sent President Martin Van Buren a gift that perfectly captures the phrase, "bad idea." It wasn't a fruit basket. It was 2 live tiger cubs. Van Buren, instead of immediately calling for animal control, was reportedly delighted. His plan? To raise them as oversized, stripy house cats right there in the White House. Just picture the chaos. Tiny tigers sharpening their claws on priceless historical documents and pouncing on the ankles of French diplomats. For a moment, the White House was the world's most dangerous petting zoo. It took the combined killjoy power of the entire US Congress to intervene, arguing that apex predators were federal property. A reluctant Van Buren eventually had to send his murder kittens to a zoo, ending America's brief and glorious era of having tigers in the West Wing. 4. Before self-care was a hashtag, John Quincy Adams had a morning routine that would break the internet today. Every single morning at 5 a.m., he'd go down to the Potomac River, take off every last stitch of clothing, and go for a refreshing nude swim. This wasn't a secret, this was just his thing. One day, a journalist named Anne Royale, who was desperate for an interview, decided to stage a power play. She found the president's clothes neatly folded on the riverbank, sat on them, and essentially held his presidential wardrobe hostage until he answered her questions. This resulted in the single most awkward interview in political history. A naked, treading water president of the United States yelling answers to a fully clothed reporter on the shore. That's not just journalism, that's a checkmate. 5. Silent Cal. Coolidge may have been a man of few words, but he had a heart of gold, especially for a raccoon he was supposed to eat. For Thanksgiving, he was gifted a live raccoon, destined for the dinner plate. But Coolidge took one look at her, and his heart melted. He pardoned the raccoon, named her Rebecca, and proceeded to give her a life of unimaginable luxury. Rebecca got a diamond-studded collar, her own personal treehouse on the White House grounds, and attended high society events like the Easter egg roll. Coolidge would walk her on a leash and carry her around like a baby. She wasn't a pet, she was a tiny, furry queen living a Cinderella story. While the nation's economy rumbled, the president was busy making sure his trash panda was living her absolute best life. 6. Teddy Roosevelt viewed the world as something to be conquered, and that included his own fitness routine. So naturally, he installed a boxing ring in the White House and regularly sparred with professional fighters. This was all fun and games until a young artillery captain landed a punch so hard it permanently detached Roosevelt's left retina, effectively blinding him in that eye. A normal person might, stop boxing. But this was Teddy Roosevelt. He didn't even tell anyone. He just secretly quit boxing, and because he clearly thought boxing wasn't intense enough, immediately took up jiu-jitsu instead. The man got blinded in a fist fight in his own house, and his only reaction was to think, I need a more efficient way to disable a man. Absolutely terrifying. 7. John Adams was a founding father, a man of letters, and a key architect of American liberty. He was also, apparently, a low-key goth with a wicked sense of humor. When it came to naming his family dog, he bypassed wholesome names like Buddy or Fido and went straight for the most metal option imaginable. He named his dog Satan. Just let that marinate. The second president of the United States would stand on the White House lawn in his powdered wig and breeches and yell, "Here, Satan, come here, boy." You have to wonder what went through the minds of foreign ambassadors who were told, "The president will see you now," right after he takes Satan for a walk. It remains the single most baffling and hilarious pet name in political history. 8. Ulysses S. Grant was the tough-as-nails general who won the Civil War. He witnessed more carnage than almost anyone in American history. So you'd think he'd be cool with a little pink in his steak, right? Absolutely not. Grant had a legendary full-blown phobia of blood. The sight of it made him sick. This fear was so intense that he demanded his White House chefs cook his steaks until they were nothing more than blackened, tasteless charcoal pucks. Any hint of red or juice was cause for a full-blown culinary crisis. Imagine being the war hero who stared down an entire army only to be defeated by a medium-rare filet mignon. It's the ultimate paradox, a man who could navigate the bloodiest battlefields but couldn't handle his dinner looking back at him. 9. Thomas Jefferson was a man of immense intellect, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and a sophisticated statesman. He was also, apparently, the director of a one-man bird opera in the White House. He was obsessed with mockingbirds. Not just in a, "oh, what a lovely songbird" kind of way, but in a, "these are my children and they will have the run of the place" way. His favorite, a bird named Dick, was allowed to fly freely throughout his private rooms. Jefferson would let the bird perch on his shoulder as he wrote, sit on his couch, and even take food from his mouth. When Jefferson played the violin, Dick would reportedly sing along. He basically lived in a real-life, slightly unhinged Disney movie, with a feathered sidekick who followed him everywhere. Imagine trying to have a serious political discussion while the president is cooing at a bird on his head. 10. Andrew Johnson had a rough time as president. He was unpopular, fought with everyone, and was the first president to be impeached. It must have been a lonely existence in the White House, but he wasn't entirely without friends. He just found them under the floorboards. During the stressful impeachment process, Johnson found comfort by tending to a small family of mice that lived in his bedroom. He didn't call an exterminator, he adopted them. He would leave out flour, water, and little crumbs for them every night, affectionately calling them his little fellows. While the entire country was in political turmoil, the President of the United States was basically running a secret miniature soup kitchen for rodents. It's a sad, bizarre, and weirdly wholesome image of a man who found more loyalty from a family of mice than from his own government. 11. Here's a story that will make you question everything. How did the Reagan administration, one of the most powerful governments of the 20th century, schedule its most critical events? Top secret intelligence? Advice from military generals? Nope. They used an astrologer. Seriously. After the assassination attempt on her husband, First Lady Nancy Reagan put her full faith in a San Francisco astrologer named Joan Quigley. Quigley's celestial charts dictated everything. The timing of speeches, press conferences, international summits with figures like Gorbachev, and even the takeoff and landing times of Air Force One were all scheduled according to the alignment of the planets. The White House staff had a secret color-coded calendar. Green for good days, red for bad days, and yellow for just stay home. The fate of the free world was literally written in the stars. 12. We need to talk about William Howard Taft's bathtub. The man was our largest president, weighing over 300 pounds, and the standard White House plumbing was simply not up to the task. Legends say he once got stuck in the old tub, and while that might be an exaggeration, the solution was very real and very big. He had a custom bathtub installed that was, frankly, an absolute unit. It was over 7 feet long and more than 3 feet wide, weighing a literal ton. For perspective, 4 normal-sized men could comfortably sit in it together. It was less of a bathtub and more of a personal, indoor swimming pool. It was so enormous that when it was eventually replaced, it was put on display as a testament to presidential proportions. It remains the single greatest piece of bathroom hardware in American history. 13. Most people who see a UFO just tell their friends about it. Jimmy Carter, a future president, filed a formal report. In 1969, years before he reached the White House, Carter, a sober-minded engineer and governor of Georgia, witnessed a strange, self-luminous object in the night sky. He described it as being as bright as the moon and said it hovered, changed colors, and then shot off. He was so convinced by what he saw that he officially filed a report with the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. This makes him the only U.S. president to have ever gone on record with a UFO sighting. He even promised during his campaign that, if elected, he would release all government documents about UFOs. Let that sink in. A man who held the nuclear codes also had a documented encounter with something he couldn't explain. 14. Chester A. Arthur is not a president who gets a lot of press, which is a shame because the man was a style icon. His obsession with fashion was so extreme that it became his defining characteristic, earning him the nickname the Dude President. And the evidence for this title is staggering. He owned 80 pairs of pants. 80. That is an entire wardrobe dedicated to just his legs. Most people don't even know 80 different kinds of pants exist. He was known to change his outfit multiple times a day, and his lavish lifestyle was the talk of Washington. You have to imagine he spent more time consulting his tailor than his cabinet. Forget policy debates. The real crisis in the Arthur White House was probably deciding whether to wear the tweed, the pinstripe, or the plaid trousers on a Tuesday. 15. Presidents often have to make tough decisions about war and peace. George H.W. Bush, however, made his toughest stance against a vegetable. He had a deep, burning, and incredibly public hatred for broccoli. This wasn't just a quiet dislike, this was a presidential crusade. He famously declared to the press, "I'm president of the United States and I'm not going to eat any more broccoli." It was a declaration of vegetable independence. He then used his executive power to officially ban the offending plant from ever being served on Air Force One or at any White House state dinner. Imagine being a White House chef, carefully crafting a world-class menu, only to be told that a common green vegetable is now considered a threat to national morale. 16. James A. Garfield had a very short presidency, but he possessed a skill so mind-bogglingly impressive, it's a crime it's not more famous. The man was basically a superhero whose power was showing off at parties. He was ambidextrous, but that's like calling a fighter jet a flying machine. Garfield could, at the exact same moment, write a perfect sentence in ancient Greek with one hand, while simultaneously writing a completely different sentence in Latin with the other. Just try to wrap your brain around that. Most of us struggle to text and walk at the same time. This man was running 2 different dead languages on 2 separate channels in his brain and outputting them flawlessly through his hands. It's a talent with absolutely zero practical use in running a country, but it's arguably the greatest presidential party trick of all time. 17. Harry S. Truman was famous for his "the buck stops here" motto and his no-nonsense attitude. But what fueled this legendary grit? Strong coffee? A sense of duty? Nope. It was a shot of bourbon at 5:30 in the morning, every single day. Before most people have even hit their first snooze button, Truman had already had a brisk walk and his medicinal shot of old granddad whiskey. This wasn't a nightcap to wind down. This was his rocket fuel to start the day. It perfectly explains his fiery personality. He wasn't just giving his political opponents hell. He was powered by distilled corn and pure, unadulterated American confidence. It's the ultimate old-school power move, a daily routine that says, "I have a country to run, but let's get a quick buzz on first." 18. Grover Cleveland was president during a time of incredible new inventions, including the telephone. But he looked at this magical talking box with the deep suspicion of a cat looking at a vacuum cleaner. He didn't trust it, he didn't like it, and he certainly didn't trust his staff to use it properly. His solution? He insisted on answering the White House telephone himself. Just imagine the scene. You're a senator with an urgent question, you call the White House, and the gruff, annoyed voice on the other end is the actual President of the United States, acting as his own receptionist. It's the ultimate, if you want something done right, do it yourself mentality, applied to a task that absolutely no president should ever be doing. He was the leader of the free world moonlighting as a switchboard operator. 19. After the tragic death of his son Willie, Abraham Lincoln's wife, Mary Todd, spiraled into a deep grief and became obsessed with spiritualism. Now, this wasn't just a casual interest. She started inviting mediums to the White House to conduct full-blown seances, trying to contact their dead son from beyond the grave. And the truly weirdest part? Honest Abe, the man leading the nation through its bloodiest war, reportedly attended several of them. While generals were planning battles and the fate of the Union hung in the balance, the president was potentially sitting in a dark room, holding hands with a psychic, waiting for a message from the spirit world. It's a hauntingly bizarre image. The great emancipator taking a quick break from history to see if a ghost had any advice for him. 20. Zachary Taylor had a famous warhorse named Old Whitey, who was basically the biggest celebrity of his day. After the war, the horse was retired to the most exclusive pasture in the country, the White House lawn. But fame, as they say, has a price. Visitors and fans would flock to see the legendary horse, and they all wanted a souvenir. But they didn't want an autograph. They wanted a piece of him. Literally. People would constantly sneak up to Old Whitey and pluck hairs from his tail to keep as mementos. It got so bad that the poor horse, a decorated war hero, was gradually being plucked bald by his adoring public. He was a living, breathing monument that was being slowly disassembled by souvenir hunters, one horse hair at a time. 21. Dwight D. Eisenhower was a five-star general who commanded the Allied forces on D-Day and faced down the Soviet Union during the Cold War. He was one of the most powerful men on the planet. And his greatest enemy? A single squirrel. Ike was an avid golfer and had a putting green installed on the White House grounds. But a local squirrel had the audacity to bury nuts in it, ruining his game. This was not a slight Eisenhower was willing to tolerate. He declared a one-man war. He issued official orders to his staff, grown men who advised him on nuclear strategy, to trap, hunt, and otherwise eliminate the fluffy-tailed menace. It's a hilarious image. A man who planned one of history's greatest military invasions being utterly defeated by a rodent with a nut-bearing habit. 22. Benjamin Harrison's administration ushered in a new era of technology when electricity was installed in the White House. It was a modern marvel, but Harrison and his wife were absolutely positively terrified of it. They had heard stories about people getting shocked and were so scared of the newfangled light switches that they refused to touch them. At all. They would have to call White House staffers to turn the lights on or off for them. More often than not, they would just leave the lights burning all night, too afraid of getting zapped in the dark. Imagine being the President of the United States, living in a state of perpetual, fearful illumination, like a child scared of the monster under the bed. Except the monster is basic wiring. 23. George Washington was the first president of a brand new republic founded on the idea that all men are created equal. So, naturally, he celebrated this by banning handshakes and making everyone bow to him like he was a king. I am not making this up. Washington was obsessed with creating a sense of dignity and respect for the office, and he felt that the casual handshake was just too familiar. So he insisted that visitors greet him with a formal bow. You can just imagine the awkwardness. People who had just fought a war to escape a monarchy now had to practice their bowing technique before meeting the new guy in charge. It was a bizarre, royal court in a republic move that made everyone wonder if they'd accidentally traded one King George for another. 24. Barack Obama's public image is one of a cool, calm, intellectual constitutional law professor. But behind that calm exterior lurked a giant nerd. Before he was a senator or a president, Obama was a serious comic book collector, and his hero of choice wasn't a noble Boy Scout like Superman. It was Conan the Barbarian. Yes, the loincloth-wearing, sword-swinging, skull-crushing barbarian. He was also a huge fan of Spider-Man. The image of the 44th president, after a long day of dealing with global crises, kicking back in the Oval Office with a vintage issue of Conan crushing his enemies, is just magnificent. It's a wonderful, humanizing quirk that proves that even the most powerful man in the world sometimes just wants to escape into a world of magic, monsters, and mayhem. 25. As the Watergate scandal consumed his presidency, Richard Nixon became an increasingly isolated figure. And in that loneliness, he apparently found some very unusual confidants: the oil paintings of the dead presidents hanging on the White House walls. Staffers reported that in his final days, a troubled Nixon would wander the halls at night, glass of whiskey in hand, and have long, one-sided conversations with the portraits. He'd reportedly ask them for advice, complain about his enemies, and even argue with them. Imagine the sheer, gothic strangeness of it all. The most powerful man in the world, on the brink of collapse, seeking counsel from a painting of Abraham Lincoln. It's less of a presidential habit and more like the first act of a horror movie. 26. George Washington. General, president, founding father, and mule-obsessed super nerd. While he projected an image of stoic leadership, behind the scenes Washington was consumed by a passion project he called muleology. He was determined to breed the perfect American mule, a hybrid animal stronger than a horse and smarter than a donkey. He wrote countless letters, studied genetics like a mad scientist, and begged the King of Spain to send him a prized donkey named Royal Gift. He essentially became America's first mule influencer, convincing other farmers of their superiority. It's a hilarious image. The man who defeated the British Empire spending his evenings stressing out about whether his prize donkey was in the mood for love. 27. We already know Calvin Coolidge had a pet raccoon, but his collection of weird White House companions didn't stop there. He also owned a mechanical horse. That's right. A bucking, whirring electric steed was installed in the presidential residence for his daily exercise. Silent Cal, a man famous for his reserved and serious demeanor, would reportedly get all dressed up in his suit and hat, climb aboard his fake horse, and go for a vigorous ride in the middle of a room. It's an image of such profound and quiet absurdity. While the world spun on, the President of the United States was inside, stoically riding a piece of gym equipment from a futuristic fever dream. 28. John Adams was one of the intellectual giants of the Founding Fathers. A serious, often cranky, deeply religious man from New England who helped shape the very soul of the nation. So naturally, when it came to naming his beloved dog, he chose a name that was dignified and respectable, right? Wrong. So wrong. He named his dog Satan. No, that is not a joke. The second president of the United States had a dog named Satan. Just take a moment to picture it. The leader of the young republic, in his powdered wig and formal attire, standing on the White House lawn yelling, "Satan, get back here. Who's a good boy, Satan?" The sheer, magnificent awkwardness of having to introduce him to visitors is mind-boggling. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador. You know my wife, Abigail, and this is Satan. It is without a doubt the most bizarre and hilariously metal pet name in all of American history. 29. What do you do when the King of Siam sends you a herd of live elephants as a diplomatic gift? If you're President James Buchanan, you seriously consider just letting them roam the White House lawn. After receiving the bizarre and enormous present, Buchanan was faced with a legitimate presidential crisis. What to do with a bunch of elephants? Instead of immediately shipping them to a zoo, he reportedly entertained the idea of creating a makeshift elephant sanctuary right there in Washington. For a brief magical moment in history, the United States was on the verge of having a presidential pachyderm park. Sadly, the Civil War broke out, and the elephant plan was abandoned, robbing America of its greatest potential tourist attraction. 30. Bill Clinton is known for his sharp intellect, but he channeled that brainpower into a very specific and very intense obsession: the New York Times crossword puzzle. This wasn't a casual morning hobby. This was a competitive sport. Clinton was legendary for his ability to finish the notoriously difficult puzzles in shockingly short amounts of time, sometimes in under 10 minutes. Aides said he would do it every single day, no matter what was happening in the world. He would use it to de-stress, often getting frustrated and muttering to himself if he got stuck on a clue. It's a perfectly humanizing image. A man who could negotiate global peace treaties but could also be brought to his knees by a tricky 7-letter word for an ancient river. 31. Gerald Ford has the reputation of being a friendly, down-to-earth, perhaps slightly clumsy president. He was the everyman who accidentally fell into the top job, which makes it all the more hilarious to learn that before all that, he was a male model. And we're not talking about a Sears catalog. In 1942, a young, dashing Gerald Ford posed alongside his then-girlfriend for the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine. He's there, looking handsome and windswept in a wintry scene. It's a stunning, wait, seriously? Fact that completely shatters his public image. The man who would later become famous for tripping on airplane stairs was once a certified hunk, smoldering on the cover of a major fashion magazine. 32. Herbert Hoover wasn't a man known for his sense of fun, but he did invent his own sport. And it was brutal. It was called Hoover Ball, and it was essentially volleyball but played with a 6-pound medicine ball. That's like playing catch with a bowling ball. Hoover was so obsessed with it that he forced his cabinet members, a group he called the Medicine Ball Cabinet, to play with him every single morning at 7 a.m. These were mostly out-of-shape, middle-aged politicians who were subjected to this grueling, pre-breakfast torture session. The game was described as more strenuous than boxing and rougher than wrestling. Hoover, meanwhile, loved it, believing it kept him fit. His cabinet members probably just felt like they were surviving a daily hazing ritual. 33. Lyndon B. Johnson had many weird habits, but his absolute favorite was a prank so terrifying it's a miracle no one had a heart attack. He owned a German-made car called an amphicar, which could drive on land and operate as a boat in water. His favorite trick was to pile unsuspecting guests into the car for a tour of his ranch. He would then pretend the brakes had failed, screaming in mock panic as he drove the car straight towards the edge of the Pedernales River. As his guests braced for impact, screaming for their lives, he would plunge the car into the water, where it would magically start floating. As they bobbed in the river, LBJ would roar with laughter at their sheer terror. It was pure, distilled, chaotic presidential evil. From toilet meetings to conversations with portraits, it's clear the White House has always been a magnet for the magnificently strange. So here's a serious question for the comments. Are these bizarre habits just funny quirks? Or is a certain level of unhinged obsession a requirement to handle the soul-crushing pressure of that job? In other words, do you have to be a little bit crazy to even want to be president? Let the debate begin. If you enjoyed these historical absurdities, hit that like button and subscribe for more.